The death row soldier. The metal bars slammed shut behind him, the sound echoing through the cold, lifeless hallway. Sergeant Ethan Cole had spent years navigating war zones, leading special forces teams through enemy territory, dodging bullets, and taking down high-value targets. But now he was on death row. A Green Beret, a war hero, a man who had given everything for his country, branded a murderer. He was used to danger, used to facing death. But this was something else, because Ethan Cole wasn't just a prisoner. He was a dead man walking. They said he had killed Colonel David Holloway, one of the most powerful men in the military intelligence community. The evidence was stacked against him. His knife was found in Holloway's chest. His DNA was under the colonel's fingernails. His fingerprints were on the murder weapon. And the worst part? There was a witness, a fellow soldier, Captain James Monroe, who swore under oath that Ethan had been seen leaving the colonel's office just minutes before the body was found. A perfect airtight case. Too perfect. Because Ethan knew one thing for sure. He didn't kill Holloway. The warden stood outside his cell, arms crossed, expression cold. "You got 48 hours, Cole," he said. "We're giving you your last request." Ethan didn't look at him, didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was calm, steady. "I want to see my K9 partner," he said. "One last time." Silence. Even the warden blinked at that. "You want a dog?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "His name is Titan. He served with me. I just want to say goodbye." The warden sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Jesus Christ, Cole." But after a long pause, he nodded. "Fine, one visit." They didn't let Ethan see Titan in his cell. Too dangerous, they said. Instead, they led him into a courtroom where reporters, government officials, and a handful of military brass sat in silence, waiting to watch the monster say his goodbyes. They thought he was guilty. Every single one of them. Ethan didn't care. The metal doors opened, and there he was, Titan. The massive German shepherd walked into the room with his new handler, his body still lean and muscular, his black and tan coat gleaming under the harsh lights. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Titan looked bigger than he remembered, stronger, more scars. But his eyes, those hadn't changed. They were still sharp, intelligent, loyal. Titan's ears twitched, his tail still. No reaction. Did he even remember? Had he moved on? Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, kneeling slightly. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. And for a second, just a second, Titan didn't move. Then he lunged. The young officer holding Titan's leash yelped, staggering as the dog ripped free from his grip. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Titan charged toward Ethan. The guards reached for their tasers, but Titan wasn't attacking. He was desperate. Titan crashed into Ethan, his massive paws knocking him backward, his whines echoing through the room. The war dog, the disciplined, trained, emotionless military machine, was sobbing. Ethan felt Titan's warm breath against his neck, his tail whipping back and forth violently, his head pressing against Ethan's chest like he was afraid to let go. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the judge, who had remained cold and unmoving throughout the trial, sat frozen. Titan let out a low, sorrowful whimper, licking at Ethan's wrists, pawing at his jumpsuit. The dog wasn't just happy, he was grieving, and everyone in the room felt it. Ethan buried his fingers in Titan's fur, letting out a shaky breath. "You still remember, don't you?" he whispered. Titan pressed closer, his ears twitching. Then he froze. His tail stopped wagging, his body went stiff, and suddenly Titan's ears snapped forward, his head turning sharply. His growl rumbled through the courtroom, but not at Ethan, at someone else. Ethan followed Titan's gaze, and his blood ran cold. Titan was staring at Colonel James Monroe, the man who had testified against him, the key witness who had put him on death row. Titan's growl deepened, his teeth bared, muscles tight. This wasn't a random reaction. Titan was identifying a threat. He was remembering something from the night of the murder. And if he was reacting like that, then it meant Monroe had been there. The room shifted. Suddenly, every eye in the courtroom was on Monroe. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. "What the hell is wrong with that dog?" Ethan's heartbeat slowed. His mind sharpened. Because Titan wasn't just happy to see him. He had just given them the first real clue to proving Ethan's innocence. Ethan looked down at Titan, stroking the dog's head gently. "You remember," he murmured. Titan let out a low snarl, still locked onto Monroe. Ethan smirked. "Good. Because now they had a fight on their hands, and Ethan Carter was ready for war." The growl rumbled through the courtroom, deep and lethal. Titan's entire body was coiled, muscles tense, hackles raised. His eyes, sharp, unwavering, were locked onto Colonel James Monroe. The air inside the room shifted. This wasn't just a dog acting out. This was something else, something primal, something dangerous. Ethan felt it in his bones. Titan was remembering. And that meant Monroe had been there the night of the murder. Monroe stiffened, his hands clenching at his sides. His jaw tightened, eyes flickering toward the judge, toward the prosecutor. "Get that dog under control," he snapped, his voice too sharp, too forced. Titan snarled, low, deadly. A sound that Ethan had only heard once before, on the battlefield, when Titan had sensed an enemy before anyone else. And now, that growl was aimed at the man who put Ethan on death row. Rachel Dawes, Ethan's lawyer, stood so fast her chair nearly toppled over. "Your Honor," she said, voice like steel, "something is very wrong here." The judge's gaze narrowed. "Explain." Rachel took a breath, turning to the court. "Military canines do not react randomly. They do not hold grudges. They do not display emotional outbursts. They are trained to detect threats." She turned toward Monroe, and right now, Titan is identifying one. Murmurs rippled through the room. The prosecutor, Major Allen Westwood, scoffed, standing. "This is absurd," he said. "You're telling me we're basing a legal argument on a dog's instincts?" Rachel didn't flinch. "I'm telling you that Titan remembers something." She looked toward the judge, "which is why I am requesting the retrieval of Titan's K9 body cam footage from the night of the murder." The courtroom stilled, the judge's brow furrowed. "That footage was ruled corrupted in the original trial," Westwood snapped. Rachel smirked. "Funny, because according to military regulations, all K9 unit footage is backed up on 2 separate classified servers." Westwood's expression darkened. Rachel crossed her arms. "Unless, of course, the footage wasn't corrupted." The murmurs grew louder. The judge tapped her gavel. "Major Westwood," she said, "I want that footage retrieved immediately." Westwood hesitated, and that was it. That was the moment Ethan knew. The footage wasn't lost. It had been buried, because someone didn't want the truth to come out. And now, it was about to. 2 hours later, the courtroom sat in eerie silence, waiting. The military forensic analyst sat at the front, a laptop open, fingers flying over the keyboard. "We were able to recover portions of the deleted footage," she announced. The screen flickered to life. The timestamp read 10:10 p.m., the night of the murder. The footage was grainy, shaky, Titan's view from his body cam, the camera strapped to his harness. The room was dimly lit, an alleyway behind the base. Then, 2 figures appeared, Colonel David Holloway and Colonel James Monroe. The entire courtroom went still. On the screen, Holloway's face was tense, angry. Holloway, voice low, urgent. "You think I don't know what you've been doing?" Monroe. "You need to lower your voice, Dave." Holloway. "You've been selling classified intel. I have proof. Do you understand what will happen if I report this?" A pause. Monroe steps forward. Monroe. "Yeah, I do." A click, a gunshot. Holloway drops. Titan barks, lunging forward. Monroe turns, sees the dog, and fires again. The footage glitches, then cuts to static. Monroe shot to his feet. "That's a lie! That footage is doctored!" Rachel turned to him, fire in her eyes. "Funny," she said, "because this footage came directly from a classified military server." Monroe's hands curled into fists. Titan's snarl deepened. Then, Monroe ran. Or at least, he tried. Titan moved first. The war dog lunged across the room, slamming into Monroe's chest with brutal precision, knocking him to the ground. Monroe screamed. The MPs rushed forward, yanking him up, slamming his wrists into cuffs. Rachel turned toward the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "the defense moves to overturn Sergeant Ethan Cole's conviction immediately." The judge nodded, her face pale. "Granted." the gavel slammed down. Ethan was free. Outside the courthouse, Ethan took his first breath as a free man. Titan sat beside him, panting, tail flicking against the pavement. But as Ethan turned, he saw them, a group of MPS, waiting. Rachel cursed under her breath. "They're here for Titan." Ethan felt his stomach drop. Of course, Titan was still government property, and after everything, they were still trying to take him away. The lead MP officer stepped forward. "Sergeant Cole, you're free to go," he said, "but the dog stays with us." Titan let out a low growl. Ethan exhaled. "Like, hell he does." He turned to Rachel. "You still got fight left in you?" Rachel smirked. "You?" Ethan looked down at Titan. The war dog sat, watching him, ears forward, tail still, waiting. Ethan knelt, scratching behind Titan's ear. "One more battle, buddy," he murmured. Titan wagged his tail once. Ethan stood, turning back toward the MPs. "All right," he said, rolling his shoulders. "Let's do this." The air outside the courthouse was thick with tension. Ethan Cole had just won his freedom, had just exposed the real murderer, had just taken back the life that had been stolen from him. But now they wanted to take Titan, the same dog who had saved his life on the battlefield, the same dog who had stood by him in the courtroom, refusing to let go, the same dog who had proven his innocence, and the government still saw him as property. Not today. Ethan rolled his shoulders, staring down the line of MPs standing between him and the open world. Titan stood at his side, still as stone, his amber eyes locked on the men in uniform, a silent warrior, a brother, waiting for the command. Ethan exhaled, voice low. "They're not taking you, buddy." Titan didn't move, didn't flinch. He was waiting, watching, ready. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. The lead MP officer stepped forward, his face unreadable. "Sergeant Cole," he said, voice clipped, "you are free to go, but Titan remains under government authority as an active-duty military asset." Rachel stepped in fast, cutting between them. "Oh, I don't think so," she snapped, holding up a legal document. Per Section 7 of the Military K-9 Retirement Act, any military working dog who has been deemed no longer fit for combat can be granted retirement into the custody of their former handler. The MP officer didn't blink. "He's still active duty?" Rachel laughed coldly. "You mean to tell me that after everything this dog has been through, after he exposed a murder, after he physically took down the real killer, he's still considered active combat personnel?" Ethan's fists clenched. "This dog has done more for this country than half the men standing behind you," he growled, "and he damn sure isn't going back into a cage." Titan let out a low, steady growl, his body tense. The MPs shifted uncomfortably. Rachel smirked. "See? Even he disagrees with you." The MP officer hesitated, but then his radio crackled to life. A voice, cold, commanding, familiar. "Stand down, Sergeant." Ethan's blood turned to ice, because he knew that voice. General Marcus Holloway, the man who had signed off on his wrongful conviction, the man who had helped cover up the murder, the man who had tried to erase him. Ethan turned toward the courthouse doors, and there he was. Holloway stepped onto the steps, hands behind his back, expression unreadable. Titan's growl deepened. Holloway glanced at the dog, then back at Ethan. "You got lucky, Cole," he said, voice smooth, controlled. "The justice system failed, and now you walk free." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "I didn't get lucky," he growled. "I got the truth." Holloway's lips twitched into the smallest smirk. "And now you think you've won?" He nodded toward Titan. "Because you exposed one corrupt officer? Because you took down Monroe? Do you honestly believe I'm just going to let you walk away with government property?" Titan let out a snarl, teeth bared, his muscles coiling. Holloway ignored him. "He belongs to us, Cole," the general continued, taking slow, measured steps forward. "And if you think I'm going to let you parade around with a classified military asset, you're mistaken." Ethan exhaled slowly, his heart pounding, not from fear, from rage. Titan wasn't some weapon. Titan was a soldier, a brother, his brother. And Holloway thought he could just take him away? Number? Not a chance. Rachel's voice cut through the silence. "You really want to do this in front of the press, General?" Holloway turned, and for the first time, he hesitated. Rachel smiled. "Because last I checked, military K-9s, especially ones that are considered classified, don't usually get paraded in front of cameras." Ethan followed her gaze, and suddenly he saw it. The reporters, they were watching, recording, streaming this live to millions of people. The entire world was watching this moment unfold. Rachel stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough so only Holloway could hear. "You take this dog away from Ethan right now, and you don't just look like a villain, you look like a fool." Holloway's jaw tightened. "You think I care about bad press?" he muttered. Rachel smirked. "Oh, I think you care about retirement, about the contracts you signed, about the people funding your next career move." She tilted her head. "And I think they care a whole lot about how this plays out." Holloway was fuming now. Ethan stepped forward. "You lost," he said simply. "Let him go." Holloway's nostrils flared. The tension was thick, electric. Then, he exhaled sharply, a short, clipped nod. The MPs behind him stepped back. The moment the officers backed away, Titan moved. The massive German shepherd pressed against Ethan's side, his tail wagging slightly. His body relaxed for the first time in hours. Ethan's throat tightened. It was over. Titan was his. And Holloway? Holloway had just lost his last play. The general's eyes burned with fury. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. Ethan smiled. "No," he said, "I won't." Holloway turned and walked away. And just like that, Ethan Cole and Titan were finally free. 1 week later, Ethan stood in a quiet field, staring at the sun setting over the mountains. Titan sat beside him, tail flicking, eyes watching the horizon. The war was over. The fight was done. And for the first time in 5 years, Ethan wasn't looking over his shoulder. He reached down, running his fingers through Titan's fur. "You ever gonna stop watching my six?" Titan let out a short bark. Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, didn't think so." He turned toward the small cabin behind them, his new home, a place with no cages, no walls, no chains, just freedom. Together, they walked toward the house, side by side, just like it was always meant to be. The world thought Ethan Cole was free. That was the lie they told. The truth? Holloway wasn't done with him. Ethan knew it the moment he saw the black SUV parked down the road from his cabin. The moment Titan's ears twitched, his growl vibrating through the wooden porch. The moment he checked his phone and saw the unknown number flashing across his screen. He answered. A cold, familiar voice rasped through the speaker. "You thought you won!" Ethan didn't blink. "I did." A pause. Then Holloway's voice lowered, edged with something darker. "You don't get to just walk away from this, Cole. You don't get to humiliate me and expect there won't be consequences." Ethan smirked. "Try me?" Click. The line went dead. Titan let out a low growl. "And Ethan?" Ethan finally smiled. Because now, the hunt was on. Ethan had spent his entire career hunting people like Marcus Holloway. Corrupt officials, black ops war criminals, men who hid behind power, pulling strings from the shadows. They weren't untouchable. They just needed the right push. So Ethan gave him one. He sent one email. To General Marcus Holloway. Subject: You can run, but you can't hide. You tried to bury me. You failed. I have everything I need to destroy you. Come find me. Let's settle this. He hit send. Then he leaned back in his chair, watching the clock. Waiting. Because Holloway? He'd take the bait. He had too much to lose. It happened at 2 a.m., the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Ethan was already awake, dressed, armed. Titan sat by the door, silent, his ears twitching. Ethan peered through the cracked blinds. 3 SUVs, men with tactical gear stepping out, scanning the area. They thought they were hunting him. They had no idea they were walking into their own graves. Ethan pulled a small remote from his pocket, flicked the switch. The field lights exploded to life. The men outside froze, caught in the glare. Ethan stepped onto the porch, shotgun in one hand, Titan at his side. "Well, well," he called out, voice calm, even amused. "Didn't expect company tonight." The men snapped their rifles up. "On your knees, Cole," one of them barked. Ethan sighed. "You boys should have stayed home." Then he gave the command. "Go!" Titan launched forward. Titan hit the first soldier like a missile. The man didn't even have time to scream before Titan's teeth clamped onto his arm, yanking him to the ground. Ethan moved fast. He fired 1, 2, 3 shots. The second soldier dropped. The third turned to run. Titan was faster. He tore into the man's leg, sending him crashing into the dirt. The last man standing didn't move, didn't blink, because a gun barrel was already pressed to his forehead. Ethan cocked the shotgun. "Where's Holloway?" The man swallowed hard. I don't know." Ethan pulled the hammer back. Titan snarled beside him. The man panicked. "He's meeting with someone tomorrow," he blurted. "At the Black Rock airstrip, midnight." Ethan tilted his head. "Who's he meeting?" The man hesitated. Titan let out a low, deadly growl. Okay, the guy stammered. "A buyer. He's selling something big, some kind of classified military data." Ethan's blood turned to ice. So, that's what this was about. Holloway wasn't just running. He was selling out the country. Ethan sighed, lowering the gun. "See? That wasn't so hard." Then he knocked the guy out cold. Titan wagged his tail once. Ethan reloaded his shotgun. "Looks like we're taking a trip, boy." Black Rock airstrip, 11:58 p.m. The place was empty, except for one private jet sitting on the runway. Holloway was there, standing beside a group of foreign buyers, talking in low, hushed voices. Ethan crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, Titan at his side. "All right, buddy," he whispered. "We do this fast, clean." Titan let out a quiet huff. Ethan smirked. "That's what I thought." Then he moved, fast, silent, a predator. Ethan hit the first guard like a ghost, knife flashing in the dark. Titan took the second, dragging the man down without a sound. Holloway turned, finally noticing. "Shit," he hissed, pulling his pistol. Ethan stepped into the light, gun raised. "Game's over, General." Holloway's face twisted with rage. "You really think this is gonna change anything?" he sneered. "You think killing me will make a difference?" Ethan tilted his head. "Who said anything about killing you?" He tossed something onto the ground, a small recording device, still blinking red, still broadcasting live, to every major news station in the country. Holloway's face went white. Ethan smiled. "Looks like the whole world just found out who you really are." The distant sound of sirens filled the air. Military police, FBI. Everyone was coming. And Holloway, he was done. Ethan lowered his gun. "See you in hell, General." Titan let out a low growl. Then they walked away. A week later, Ethan sat on the back porch of his new home, staring at the rolling hills in the distance. Titan lay beside him, his head resting on Ethan's boot, tail flicking lazily. They had won. Holloway was gone. The military had been exposed. And Titan was finally home. Ethan reached down, scratching behind the dog's ear. "You ever gonna stop watching my six?" Titan let out a short bark. Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, didn't think so." Together, they watched the sun set over the mountains, and for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Cole was finally free. The world thought General Marcus Holloway was finished. They were wrong. Ethan Cole knew better than to trust the system. The same system that had put him on death row, that had erased evidence, that had covered for men like Holloway. It wasn't just going to fix itself. Holloway wasn't the type of man who went quietly, and Ethan wasn't the type of man who left loose ends. It took less than 48 hours before the news cycle could even finish tearing him apart, before the government could formally charge him with treason, before he could even be processed into federal custody. Holloway was gone, vanished. The reports were thin, full of redacted bullshit. Some said he was taken into CIA custody. Others whispered about a private extraction unit working for a foreign power. Rachel Dawes, Ethan's lawyer, had been the first to call him. "He's gone," she had said, "and nobody's asking the right questions." But Ethan didn't need questions. He needed a location. Ethan sat at a small diner off a forgotten highway, stirring a cup of coffee as the man across from him sighed in frustration. "You realize I'm committing about 5 felonies just by talking to you, right?" Frankie Morales, former Air Force intelligence officer, muttered as he tapped furiously on a secure laptop. Ethan didn't blink. "Then let's make it 6, he said. "Where is he?" Frankie muttered something under his breath but kept typing. You know, normal people just go home after clearing their names, he grumbled. You go hunting. Ethan leaned forward. This doesn't end until he's in the ground. Titan sat at his feet, head up, watching Frankie like he knew something was off. Finally, Frankie sighed. All right, I got a hit. The guy went off grid, but he didn't go far. He turned the laptop toward Ethan. A satellite image loaded, an old military facility deep in the Arizona desert, Black Rock Bunker, classified, forgotten, the perfect place to disappear. Frankie smirked. Hope you brought your gun, Ranger, 'cause you're gonna need it. Ethan finished his coffee. Good. Black Rock Bunker. 0200 hours. Ethan moved like a ghost in the night, Titan at his side, his rifle tucked close to his chest. The facility was exactly what he expected, a remnant of the Cold War, abandoned by the government but repurposed by men like Holloway. Security was light, but that was the mistake men like Holloway always made. They thought their enemies would never come for them. Ethan wasn't an enemy, he was the Reaper. The first guard never saw him coming. A silenced shot dropped him instantly. Titan took the second, ripping him down before he could even make a sound. 2 down, only Holloway left. Ethan moved deeper into the bunker, heart steady, breath controlled, until he found him. Marcus Holloway sat behind a makeshift desk, surrounded by computer monitors, radio equipment, and half-burned classified files. His gun was already on the table. He knew. Ethan stepped inside, rifle aimed, Titan at his side. Holloway exhaled, leaning back in his chair. Guess I should have expected you, he muttered. Ethan said nothing. You really think killing me changes anything? Holloway smirked. You think this world runs on truth, justice? You're a soldier, Cole. You know better. Ethan's finger rested on the trigger. No, he said simply, but it ends with you. Holloway's smirk faltered. Ethan pulled the trigger. 1 shot, right between the eyes. Holloway's body slumped over the desk, lifeless. Titan let out a low huff, watching his old enemy fall. Ethan lowered the gun, exhaling. No loose ends. The bunker burned behind them, the flames licking at the sky as Ethan and Titan walked away. No sirens, no news reports, no one to stop them, just silence, just peace. Ethan glanced down at Titan, running a hand through the dog's fur. You ready to go home, boy? Titan wagged his tail once. Ethan smirked. Together, they walked into the darkness. Free, finally free.